It is now more than a year since rightsholder Heroic Signatures started self-publishing Conan the Barbarian under Titan Comics, and in honor of Cimmerian September, it is high time to see how they have fared. Let's dive in. Regular watchers of our live streams will have heard me rant about how good Titan's Conan relaunch has been many times over, and our guests that have also read it have been quite impressed as well. And these are guests who have some writing experience themselves and who know their stuff, like most recently John De La Rose.
It's 10 out of 10. Not only does it have that classic writing feel, but the artists they've got just have a wonderful feel as well to it that just kind of evokes that old style. And that's what
absolutely.
I'm into.
Yeah, because I mean that guy, he is practically a John Buscema reborn.
Yeah, so good.
Clearly, this relaunch nailed it, so this video review is about how they nailed it. Because rather than send you scouring through multiple past live streams for individual issue reviews, I'll repeat my overall thoughts now more than 1 year in. And to make it even easier for prospective readers, I'll do it storyline by storyline. Storylines which now have been collected into 3 paperbacks, which may be easier to track down at this stage than the individual issues. To keep it simple, I'll restrict this review to the issues of the main Conan the Barbarian title collected in those paperbacks. The Savage Sword of Conan relaunch I will get back to in another video. So, in this review of the first year of the main title, I'll provide the setup for each volume, but with the bare minimum of spoilers, as I wouldn't want to deprive anyone inspired to experience these stories for themselves from the pleasure of doing that. First up though, let's address the challenge of relaunching Conan. There are only 21 complete original Conan stories, yet these have formed the basis for an accumulated 30 years of Conan comics from Marvel, plus another 15 years from Dark Horse. The original stories have all been adapted, some of them several times over, and to some extent, so has Conan's life between these stories, so where to go next? How to relaunch Conan in a way that will feel exciting and engaging to new readers, without giving long-time fans the sense that they've seen all this before, while still making it clear this is Conan, and have these new stories instantly be recognizable as such. Well, they found a way, namely to go back to Robert E. Howard's original body of work, as well as the original run of Savage Sword of Conan from the 70s. More specifically, Roy Thomas adaptations of the original Howard stories, as visualized by the great John Buscema. More than anything else, it was these comics that not only elevated Conan into the stratosphere during the first golden age of Robert E. Howard, but, as we saw in our retrospective of the Conan the Barbarian feature film, it was these comics that paved the way for that movie to happen in the first place. And now that movie too is also part of the Conan legacy. This accumulated legacy is honored in this relaunch, as regular writer Jim Zub has not only taken the same deep dive into the world of Robert E. Howard as Roy Thomas did before him. He very much so writes in the same style as him, and he applied the Roy Thomas method to incorporate everything that has come since into this Titan relaunch. Visually, having abandoned the look and attire Conan adopted for the Dark Horse reboot, regular artist Rob de la Torre channels John Buscema and even continues using his design, meaning the classic bearskin is back in, as it should be. But the look is nothing without a fresh set of stories to go with it. In our earlier interviews with writer Jim Zub and Fredrik Malmberg, the keeper of the Conan legend, they not only revealed that they would go all the way, with heads and limbs being lopped off and gratuitous nudity, they also disclosed that they have mapped out all of Conan's exploits in a brand new, to-be-disclosed timeline that all things Conan will adhere to going forward, and this will also help in plotting out new stories that don't contradict established Howard canon. Not just for Conan, but for all of Howard's creations, which may pop up or otherwise be referenced, and that's exactly what we see has happened in the comics released since. With that, let's start breaking down the comics, beginning with those collected in the very first paperback, bound in black stone. This paperback begins with a free Comic Book Day issue, otherwise known as Issue 0, which Jim Zub has described as the mission statement for the series, and that's exactly what it is. In this prequel of sorts, we go back to what is arguably Conan's origin story, for lack of a better term, the frequently referenced, but very rarely seen, Battle of Venarium. That is the teenage Conan's baptism of fire, when his tribe teamed up with 40 others to fight back the invading Nemedians who were trying to conquer their homeland of Cimmeria. In the aftermath of the battle, young Conan is fascinated by the weaponry and jewelry of the invading army, and the story that all of these items must have had before ending up as spoils of war in the frozen north. This triggers Conan's memories of his grandfather, a wanderer who had traveled the world, and the tales he would tell from the mysterious southern lands, with their gleaming empires and untold riches. The issue ends with Conan deciding to leave Cimmeria and wander to see the world for himself, meaning this issue ends just where the original Marvel comic run and later Dark Horse run began, with a young Conan that had just started his wandering. This way, this issue introduces both Conan and why he is so proficient in combat to new readers, while also giving long-time readers a tale they haven't seen before, the Battle of Venarium, and Conan's decision to leave his homeland to begin with. Conan's first few years of wandering were extensively covered by both Marvel and Dark Horse though, and all of those stories are easily accessible in reprints. So rather than retread that ground, which will be very familiar to longtime fans anyway, the first 4 issues of the regular series picks up 8 years later, with an already battle-hardened Conan, now a mercenary and wise to the ways of the world, who fate has brought away from the gleaming cities of the south to a tavern on the border of his homeland. Brissa, a female picked warrior, storms in and warns that an army unlike any the world has ever seen is hot on her tail, and shortly thereafter, the Army of the Lost, comprised of seemingly undead Picts under a dark spell, goes on the attack. Only Conan and Brissa make it out alive and head north back to Conan's homeland of Cimmeria, only to learn that the Army of the Lost are already there. Following the bloodshed the Army of the Lost has left behind, they arrive at a citadel of black stone, where they encounter not just captured Cimmerians, including veterans from the Battle of Venarium, but they get a glimpse into who may be behind the Army of the Lost, a cult of reptilian snake men, who in their Lovecraftian chanting let it be known that they are followers of the necromancer Thulsa Doom. I won't provide any further spoilers beyond this setup, but my overall impression though is that the stories collected in this volume make for a good introduction for anyone new to Conan. It is certainly better than the 2019 Marvel relaunch, though this one collection in isolation is perhaps not as strong an introduction as the Dark Horse relaunch was 2 decades ago. But this one collection shouldn't be reviewed in isolation. That's why I waited this long to do this video. The stories collected in the first volume were released over a couple of months and told newcomers everything they needed to know about Conan, while long-term fans recognized that beyond the one battle featured here, a whole interconnected Robert E. Howard universe had been set up for further exploration in future stories. Indeed. With that, let's move on to issue 5 and the second trade paperback. The second paperback collects issues 5 through 8, which covers the storyline Thrice Marked for Death. This doesn't pick up right where the previous storyline left off. No, there's been a time jump, as we now catch up with Conan several years later, in the aftermath of the original Howard story Queen of the Black Coast, which has been adapted by both Marvel, Dark Horse, and French publisher Glenant, whose adaptation was reprinted by Ablaze. If you read any of these, you're good. If you haven't, no worries, you'll be up to speed a few pages in, because all you need to know going in is that Conan is in mourning following the death of his first true love. He is drowning his sorrows in booze, and to fund his drinking habit, he has teamed up with a band of thieves in the city of Shadisar the Wicked, an iconic location in Conan lore, which was even featured in the movie. Anyway, this band of thieves is hired to steal a very specific treasure from the temple of Bel, the god of thieves. So by the outset, this looks to be a heist tale in the style of the classic story Tower of the Elephant. But before long, it subverts expectations in the best way possible when Conan and the crew who hired him actually find the treasure, a black stone, which instantly gives Conan flashbacks to the Blackstone Citadel from years ago, and for the reader, from the previous storyline, because this is all connected, and only now do we see the glimpse of the larger tapestry that is unfolding. The stone contains 3 specters, capable of possession, so from there, without spoiling too much, the storyline takes a turn toward Evil Dead territory, which leads directly into the next storyline. The third paperback covers issues 9 through 12, thus rounding out the first year of Titan's Conan relaunch, and the storyline covered here, The Age Unconquered, is such a wild ride that I can't really give anything away without spoiling it. So I will simply say that this is where everything set up in the previous 2 storylines converge, all while taking a deep dive into Robert E. Howard's lore, which also intersects with Lovecraftian lore. This gets so trippy and so metaphysical that in the best way possible, it even reminded me a bit of Jim Starlin's Thanos-centric stories. Read as a whole, the prequel plus the 12 issues contained in these 3 paperbacks blow both the Dark Horse and 2019 Marvel relaunches out of the water, and clearly demonstrate that the creatives behind it know their Howard, they know their Lovecraft, they know the past comics, they know the movies, and most importantly, they know how to build on it all to keep it fresh and interesting for both newcomers as well as long-time fans. If I were to bring up some criticism though, it is that when we get to the third collection, some homework may be required. As I mentioned already, you'll be fine if you haven't read Queen of the Black Coast. But if you, by the time you get to the 3rd volume, are not already familiar with, at the very least, the Howard stories The Tower of the Elephant or The Shadow Kingdom, both of which have been adapted by Marvel and even better by Dark Horse, then you're gonna be a bit lost. So lost in fact, that I think it will impede on the enjoyment of the story. So while I recommend you check out these 3 paperbacks, I also recommend that in order to fully enjoy them, you seek out Tower of the Elephant and The Shadow Kingdom, whether it be the original prose or the later Marvel or Dark Horse adaptations. The Shadow Kingdom in particular has had a profound effect on popular culture, and it's one of my favorite stories, like of all time, in any medium. If there's demand for it, maybe I'll do a video simply reading the original story. Let me know if you'd want that in the comments. The 3 paperbacks I've reviewed here, as well as the individual issues contained within them, can all be found at your local retailer or ordered directly from Titan's website, which is linked to in the description. And you should be able to find them from any other online retailer of your choice as well. That is up to you, as I have no discount code to offer anywhere and I get no kickback either way. I do hope that you will check these paperbacks out though, and that you will stick with the future issues after that. Because here is a comic that actually does everything the actual audience wants. That is, maintain the integrity of the source material and respect the audience, which all too often hasn't happened in recent years, which in turn has precipitated something of a collapse in the Western comic book industry. Anything that bucks that trend, and which is this good in its own right, I would like to see supported. So, will you be checking out Titan's Conan the Barbarian? And if you have, what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments.